Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were talking about Afghan situation. We are going to continue that discussion with a new panel. In order to help us understand what is going on, we are joined by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab, who is an expert on foreign affairs and strategic issues. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Dr. Syed Mohammad Ali also joins us in the studio. Again, he is an expert on strategic affairs. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Lieutenant General retired Naeem Khalid Lodhi Saab, former NSA and Defense Minister of Pakistan, joins us on Skype. General Saab, as always, thank you very much for your valuable participation. Let me start with the studio. Dr. Jaspal, your take on what is happening in Afghanistan. Do you think that it is going to be a coalition government or interim government that is going to actually materialize, or it is going to be an Afghan Taliban takeover through and through?
My understanding is that, of course, it was unexpected. So we were expecting that the Taliban will take over the Kabul soon, but the way it happened today, or in the last 7-8 days, that reflects three things. Right. A, we are not aware what was the understanding, or is the understanding between the Americans and the Taliban themselves. Mm-hmm. There is some understanding. Mm-hmm. If somebody is saying that there is no understanding, that is again debatable. Mm-hmm. Second is, it will be inclusive government. Mm-hmm. Because if you see the trend, what the Taliban followed, that before starting their in the countryside conquest, they started including people from the Northern Alliance. They started including even from the Hazaras. Right. So in one of your program, when we were discussing at that time, we also identified that Taliban's this time movement is more multi-ethnic, multi-religious, rather than simple like previous Taliban kind of a movement. Mm-hmm. That reflects that there is an understanding. And if you see that Abdullah, Karzai, they all are in touch with the Taliban. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's the reason that they compel, or the Afghan forces, when they saw that many people are in touch with them, and they immediately started surrendering. The most important thing is that what this Dostum's journal is saying, that we were expecting that the government forces will be going to fight along us, but they immediately surrendered. Mm-hmm. So that reflects that there is something, because whenever there is a sudden like this kind of thing, it is not without prior agreements.
Right. Syed Mohammad Ali, your take on the unfolding situation, and what do you see? An interim government or a Taliban takeover eventually?
I see it is more likely that it will be an interim arrangement, and I expect Taliban to be more accommodative and restrained towards other factions, because I think their diplomacy in the last few months has indicated that they are sensitive to the fact that despite their very lightning gains on the ground, they also desire international diplomatic legitimacy and political acceptability in order to convert their conquest into a stable rule. So that is very important. But let me just quickly flag that the overarching factor, despite this hurried withdrawal of the Western forces, is the fact that President Biden took this politically difficult decision. He's the first president in 20 years to take this politically difficult decision that it is not worth wasting more American lives, more American money, and more American political capital on a weak proxy which does not have constituency and legitimacy within Afghanistan.
Right. He might be the one who pulled the trigger, but we know that the actual deadline was given by the Trump administration. So in effect, it is continuation of that policy, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I think the fact that three things are clearly indicative of the US decision, that they are not going to waste any more political capital, money or lives to protect the very weak, illegitimate and corrupt Kabul administration. Three things. Number one, I think they're pulling out the forces.
Right.
Number two, you are aware that Mr. Khalilzad had a critical and pivotal role in persuading Ashraf Ghani to leave.
Right.
And thirdly, that the Doha process, in tandem with the very important delegation which has arrived today in Islamabad, is going to be very critical in terms of a multilateral arrangement which
Right.
is going on in tandem with the political and security developments in Kabul,
Right.
that will hopefully yield an inclusive setup which may not take shape immediately, but I think it's a positive sign.
Right. Ambassador Zalmay Khalilzad is also a holdover from the previous administration. That's why
Yes.
I was actually talking about this. Let me go to Jarul Saab. Jarul Saab, first of all, let me concede that what you were saying, that the Afghan government will dissipate very quickly, has proven correct today. So we start with that. But the reports are that regardless of what Sohail Shaheen says, there is a lot of panic on Kabul's roads. People are afraid. How important it is for the Afghan Taliban, especially the commander on ground, to actually state what Sohail Shaheen has been stating on record. And secondly, of course, is there going to be an interim government, or is it going to be a Taliban government, sir?
Very much. I think if we just, if you give me a minute, just I would like to reiterate the background how all this has happened. First of all, it should not be taken as a military victory, because I am a military man. There's no way that any force, however strong it may be, can actually sweep a country of this size within weeks. So I would call it a political coup. In my opinion, the people of Afghanistan were fed up from the occupation forces, the way they treated them, and secondly, the corrupt Afghan governments. I'm not saying only governments, even Karzai's government and then Ashraf Ghani's government. And Taliban were preparing all these grounds quite some time back. It is now revealed that the way people were welcoming them, and except for a few areas where fighting did take place, generally there was no fighting. It was more of talking and people joining them in hordes. Second important thing to understand is that armies are not made by just putting on uniforms and having guns in their hands. Armies, they require some objectives, some morale, some backing, and also in Afghan army the problem was that the foot soldiers were from Pashtun ethnic groups, and the officers were from northern areas and other groups, so that was also a great mistake, I think, in the composition of the forces, and there were ghost, soldiers and all that. So what I think is that, number one, if Afghan Taliban have shown brilliance in military strategy, if they have shown brilliance in diplomacy, they have been to Iran, they have been to China, they have been to Russia, even to Pakistan, they are talking to people and exactly alleviating the apprehensions of the world that about women and all that. They have been saying whatever it is. They have been very good in negotiating, gaining time in Doha whenever they require. And so, if they were good in all these three fields, I have no reason to believe that they will not be good in internal politics. I think they will go for an inclusive interim setup, and they will have some legitimacy phenomena either in the form of Grand Jirga, excuse me, or in the form of some elections or whatever. But they will definitely not budge from enforcement of Sharia, about which they have said that they will also get input from other sects and other things. So I think all said and done, as I was saying the first day, once everybody was not believing me, that after the Americans depart, Afghanistan is going towards peace, and this area is going towards peace, and there will be hardly any spillover, good spillovers on Pakistan and not bad spillovers. I said there will be no refugees. I said that Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan will be squeezed. Today there is a news that their leaders are asking for asylum, for negotiation with Pakistani authorities, and this has been said earlier also. So what I feel is, as I kept on telling you before also, that those who wanted chaos in this region, and I can name them, I've always been naming them, America, India, Afghan Ghani, they have been defeated. And those who wanted this area to be peaceful, China, Russia, Iran, Pakistan, Central Asian countries, people of Afghanistan, Tehreek-e-Taliban Afghanistan, they have succeeded. Now, how do they manage the future? I am quite, because they are aware of two things. They need international recognition, they need internal support. For that, I think they will do everything to make sure that these two things are, they get these two things.
Right. My question was also to communicate to the people in Kabul that there is no need to panic, because there is concern. Suhail Shaheen is not sitting on ground in Kabul. It is the Taliban commander who are standing in front of Kabul. But regardless of that, Ashraf Ghani has left Kabul and Afghanistan. We don't know whether he has stepped down or not. His resignation, how important is it? If he doesn't resign, is there a possibility of him carrying on with the claim that he is a government in exile? Or he has resigned, we don't know it yet.
Look, first of all, you are correct. Within the Kabul, if you see in the last 20 years, there was a civil society, there was a different life, there was people have a westernized life, and suddenly they have seen that there is no Taliban are there with their guns in their hands, blah, blah. So naturally, it generates a fear in the minds of the locals who are there.
Right.
It will take a time. It will take a time that they will come out of that fear, especially if the Taliban adopted a right policy after forming this interim government or follow-up.
Right.
So fear will continue. Commonwealth will remain, especially in the Kabul, will remain afraid. Second, your question is, I think that Ashraf Ghani will not be able to formulate government in exile. Because if you see that his major component or the part of that, they are remain in Afghanistan. It's not a typical type of 96 when the Northern Alliance was intact and everyone was there. There were some kind and the international community accepted that kind of a thing. Now, after 9, you can say currently the issue is that Americans themselves have lost the credibility. If you see now British are criticizing them that their exit was not appropriate. Second is that in this current situation, if somebody is thinking that Biden Americans realized that the Russians in the last 4 years intervention, the Chinese, you can say inside, the role of the other nations inside the Afghanistan was such as that the Americans were not able to control it.
Yeah.
So in this situation, if they will go for an exile government, who will be going to provide them a legitimacy? And if somebody is, there's the impression that I think Ashraf Ghani was not clear about the ground realities. And even yesterday when he was making a speech, just read his speech. That reflects that he was sitting in the palace as the other warlords were sitting in the palace, and then they found that everything has gone. So, and finally here, I think it will be a good study how much money was given to the warlords and to prepare the militia. Because I came across the reports, and especially the troops which they recruited when they deployed ahead, there was no logistical support. Even they were paid less, all the money go in the pocket. And we have to not forget the American money, if they are saying 2 trillion, 1.5 trillion didn't move from or even more than that from Washington. So if somebody is thinking that this kind of the investment raised the army, and why it was not only small arms were there, and they have now given to the Taliban, and they are with and my understanding is maybe many of those, you can say they were giving a 300,000 troops number, many of them have just changed their clothes, white flag, and they are now with the Taliban. The good thing here is there is a two-filio. A lot of the commission officers of the Taliban were trained in the Indian Academy, and their entire intel visited the India and everything. What was their training? What was there happening, and how we are going to handle this kind of a situation? Though at the moment it seems that, as Jalsa was very right pointing out, that we will be in a position to get rid of the TTP and like these kind of things. But we have to also not forget where is the fear. The fear is the success of the Taliban will be going to strengthen the slogan of religiously radicalized groups, not only in our country but in the entire neighborhood of Taliban. How we have to handle that, that is a question.
Right. Dr. Saab, you actually pointed out that Ashraf Ghani, despite everything, will not command any moral support. We know, and you pointed out that Indian Army kept on training the Afghan army as well. So Ashraf Ghani, we haven't heard a final word from India, A, and B, all of this is happening on India's Independence Day. So we don't know what India is going to actually cook up. That was a concern. But let me go to Dr. Sayyid Muhammad Ali. Dr. Saab, if you remember in 2003, when the US actually invaded Iraq, the entire army, Iraqi army melted down. But later on, these people regrouped and joined ISIS. And a concern is there that this might happen here as well. When you are victorious, you think that you are a monolith, but later on, there is gap between various groups. So now the question is there a fear that in coming days, we are going to see a replay of some kind of civil war or some kind of problems in Afghanistan?
That concern is there, but I am not that pessimistic because of 4 reasons. Number one, let me reiterate my first point that I said in the first intervention, that even the US, after spending 20 years and the world's best defense equipment, the world's best intelligence equipment and everything, they have assessed that they should not waste more resources and lives on such incompetent and corrupt proxies. Number one. Number two, like Jalal Sahab also pointed out, and Dr. Diswal also mentioned, that the rank and file of the Afghan National Security Force also realized that what should they fight for? The armies don't fight just with weapons. They need an ideology, they need a narrative to gel, to put their lives in the harm's way. It was not worthy of fighting for people like as incompetent and corrupt like Mr. Ashraf Ghani and his coterie. Okay, so that's why that is also an important reason. Number three, the lightning advances of Afghan Taliban is not just based on their strategy and a robust military capability. It is also because of the huge support that they enjoyed in that environment, and also a lack of stiff resistance. If even the most strongest warlords and people like Mr. Ismail Khan, General Abdul Rashid Dostum, these people could not survive. They decided either to join the Taliban or flee. So that indicates that the writing was on the wall. And lastly, it is very important that the regional countries are going to play a very important role. That is why the process afoot in Islamabad and the process which is going to start in Doha now are critical, because how the international community plays its role in collaboration with the changing power dynamics within Afghanistan, to convert this transition in a peaceful manner is very critical. This is a decisive opportunity. This is a fleeting moment, and I hope that and a statement which was given today by Secretary of State Blinken, you must have seen it, was very critical. He was asked this question: will you recognize Afghan Taliban government if they take over? And he did not say no. He laid out 2 conditions. He said if they respect human rights and if they do not harbor terrorists. I think this is not too much to ask. And this is a reiteration of the expectation which the Afghan Taliban have already made as part of the Doha Agreement.
And my question, I understand that you're talking about how the forces melted down, right? My question is, they have been trained by various forces, the US and India and others. Now these people, do they cease to exist? No. They are going to be either civilians or they are going to be absorbed into Afghan Taliban. You are right that they were not even being paid salaries for many months. So at this moment, They might be there and they are unarmed, they have been disarmed, but is there a possibility that they are going to become part of some kind of violent resistance or some kind of disruption in Afghanistan that might create more problems like ISIS?
I think there are
in
three
Iraq.
reasons why it is less likely. I will not dismiss it absolutely, but three reasons. They do not see an international supply line of weapons coming because the Americans have left. Number two, Afghan Taliban have choked and controlled all the border crossing points.
Yeah.
So no fuel, ammunition, logistics supply can come from anywhere. And number three, if they take over the airport and other things in the next few days, even aerial route and logistical supply will become difficult. So administratively, diplomatically, logistically, it is unlikely. Lastly, the most staunchest warlords like Mr. Ismail Khan, like Mr. Abdul Rashid Dostum, if they decided in their own self-interest not to wage a war,
Right.
not to fight, what do you expect from the others?
Yeah, Ismail Khan actually came back from retirement. He is an aging man. Dostum actually was being treated. He went through a surgery, and after that,
He's also aging.
he is also aging.
But,
He's not getting
quickly,
younger.
you go to because it's the General Sab, I can just add. A ideological factor is in Taliban's favor.
Okay.
When we are expecting these kind of the groups emergence.
Okay.
And when we say about the insurgency with the reference to the religion or something like that, it is not acceptable to the Russians, Central Asians, Pakistanis, Iranis. So that's why civil war cannot be ruled out.
Right, or terrorism for that matter.
That cannot be ruled out.
Right, General Saab, one way or the other, there is going to be a new government in Kabul, and it seems that it will come up with a lot of agenda to stabilize Afghanistan. Is there a possibility that whatever gains Afghan people have made in education, in job creation, especially for women also, education of children, 45% of Afghanistan's population right now is under 15 years of age, security, safety for them, all this progress is not reversed if Afghan Taliban takes over, or for that matter, if it decides to join any kind of setup.
First of all, I do not think that we have the proper statistics that what actually has been gained under the American, tutelage and with the Afghan Ashraf Ghani's government and all that. I think it was a very corrupt setup. A lot of money was being eaten away. So I don't know what was actually spent on education. But anyway, whatever was achieved, I think it is in the interest of Afghan Taliban or any future setup that the country must progress. And once we say progress, of course, it means that the women must play their role. There should be education for all, and people must take up various professions. There should be doctors, engineers. And as I say that I think this lot of Afghan Taliban, they understand all these things. And it is quite likely that instead of going back, they should be moving forward. This is what we expect. That is in their own interest. That is what the world will be watching. But I will not bet today that what actually is going to happen. I will only give a comment on, you said that, once Iraq was invaded or, even Libya was invaded, and later on there was a resurrection. Those countries were invaded by foreign forces. And there is always a resurrection whenever a foreign force invades. And this is also what has happened in Afghanistan when the Americans came. Now, Afghan Taliban are not foreign forces. They are actually indigenous people from the same country. So I don't think that very soon any civil war can emerge, or very soon any counter, forces can come up. They may come up if Afghan Taliban fail to deliver whatever they were promised, if they do not give them justice, if they do not give them protection, or if they do things which are abhorrent to the general public. So then these things might happen, but not before 3 years, 4 years. At least this much time is required for such a reaction to coalesce and come up. So for the time being, I don't see any problem for Taliban, except that they may not be able to do exactly whatever is in their mind because of the two factors which I already said: international recognition and internal support. this time they'll have to be a little mellowed down, they'll have to be more accommodative.
Right. Jarul Sahab, you were talking about these forces not actually mounting any kind of challenge to the Afghan Taliban. The question is not about the will to do anything. The question is about capacity. These are trained soldiers, and expertise doesn't go away. Is there a possibility that whatever government actually takes over absorbs the skilled people as well, so that there is a broad-based armored force as well, and these people don't get any incentive to tomorrow contribute to chaos?
Right. I think it is highly probable because within these forces we have people who know how to handle artillery guns and tanks, even helicopters and jet aeroplanes. So I think Taliban should try, I mean, this is what I think, it is logical that they should try to absorb them and coalesce them into proper armed forces, because they would like to have that. Any country would like to have a very strong force. So it is highly probable what you are saying.
Right.
Rather than these forces being left at their own, they are likely to be absorbed.
They are likely to be a problem. I'm told that we have to actually start winding up this segment. So I'm going to ask you for a conclusion, Dr. Jaspal, and if some question arises, I'm going to ask you from within that conclusion. Please go ahead.
My understanding is that we have to be very careful. The Afghan delegation is here. Definitely, Pakistani government has an opportunity to advise them and what will be the structure of the government there. And Taliban are listening to some extent to Pakistan, but not. We will not expect that they will accept our dictates, but they will accept our advice. So we should play a constructive advisory role. Number one. Number two, we have to keep in mind that Afghanistan is full of corruption. There is a big illegal economic setup, and how the Taliban will be going to deal with it and what will be its repercussions, that setup's repercussions on us, we must be more stricter. And by here, good news for Pakistan is that we have at least managed the border. We have to strengthen our management there.
Right. Very quickly, before I go to Dr. Ali, and I'm going to ask the same question to put the same question to him as well. Dr. Jaspal, tomorrow Pakistan's NSE is meeting. What points do you think they are going to actually take on board?
I think that we first of all focus that how we have to deal with our own security. Spillover impacts of such kind of the things have political, economic, military. So we have to manage all these three areas. Second is that big delegation is there, how we have to deal them, because entire world will be looking now towards Pakistan. Right. And finally, that we have to make clear from the very beginning that TTP or these kind of people are not acceptable.
Right. That is very important. Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali, your conclusions.
Very briefly, 5 points. I think most importantly, the biggest reassurance for Pakistan is that its stance that there is no military solution to Afghanistan has been vindicated. Secondly, for the great powers and for the major powers, I think it is very important that their major interest is to extract a commitment from Afghan Taliban that they will offer an assurance that this territory will not be used against them. Whether Al-Qaeda, whether it is ETIM or whether it is Daesh, and for Pakistan as well, we expect some commitment that their territory will not be used by BLA or TTP to harm Pakistan. Thirdly, I think a very important gain for Pakistan in terms of geopolitics is that the reduced Indian influence in Afghanistan can offer some assurance for Pakistan. As long as we can ensure that this turmoil is not used by non-state actors for indirect or asymmetrical conflict against Pakistan. Lastly, I think again I reiterate that this diplomatic effort, which is simultaneously afoot in Islamabad and Doha, is critical, and both regional, global powers, the Afghan stakeholders and Pakistan must not waste this opportunity.
Right. Jarul Sahab, your conclusion, sir.
I would like to say that this delegation which is here, it was pre-planned, and it was not after the latest events which have happened that they came here. So we must keep that thing in mind as far as their progress is concerned. I would say that something very good has happened to Afghanistan, something very good has happened to the region, and something very good has happened to Pakistan. And I would like to add one more thing. I do not believe in this cliche that problems are not solved by wars and they are solved by talking. No, sir. The valiant Afghan freedom fighters earned their freedom by defeating or at least making sure that it becomes very expensive for Americans to stay here. If they had not fought for them, this situation wouldn't have arrived. So this is a false, I would say, thing that things are not decided by war. Things are being decided by war. They will keep on getting decided by wars. Thank you.
Right, General Saab, on that conclusion, I have to thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your participation. Let me also thank Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal Saab and Dr. Syed Muhammad Ali for your participation as well. Viewers, this is the end of the segment, and while we are talking about all these things, if you look at how Western media, and I'm not going to mention Indian media at all, if Western media, you look at it, you will see this desire to scapegoat somebody. And on one side, we keep on hearing, of course, that it is Biden administration which is being blamed by the media. On the other side, of course, they have this muscle memory and usual reflex to point or put blame on Pakistan. Regarding Biden administration, one has to understand that it was a continuation of what President Trump actually did by announcing a deadline and failing to carry it through or withdraw during his own time. He ensured that this kind of, chaos that is existing on the Afghan soil, that happens. But regarding the current government, it had to go. When you talk about the entire operation being a failure, let us face it, the original, when it comes to goals, it was to eliminate Al-Qaeda and to levy some kind of punishment, exact some kind of revenge on the people who were harboring Al-Qaeda. If you look at that, 20 years out of power is enough punishment. But at this moment, they had to go. No government can stay there. Regarding Pakistan, and this is the most problematic aspect of this reflex of Western media. We have gutted our own brethren who died fighting terrorism in Pakistan. We have butted 80,000 people. $150 billion have been lost. And who knows how much else was lost, right? When are you going to stop blaming the country that has been repeatedly trying to help you all? This was my segment. With that, I conclude and thank you. Take care.